along with Maggie from Oh You're Lovely. Coming back with another podcast. Y'all, I don't know how this one's going to go. We're having a lot of tech issues. It's taken us about 45 minutes just to start recording. And right before I hit the record button, Maggie just completely disappeared. So we're not sure how well this is going to work. We're sorry if it doesn't. We'll do our best. And today's topic is fits in really well with everything we're dealing with today, but it's how to avoid burnout, which I think we say this on every single podcast, but we are not experts in anything that we talk about. We just voice our opinions and our thoughts and our best practices that we don't always ourselves do. So it's a do as we say, not as we do kind of situation. And on that note, Maggie, you want to take the floor for a little bit?
So I think there's some real basic things that people do to avoid burnout. I guess when I think about avoiding burnout, I'm like, I'm going to go on a trip. I'm going to do a staycation. I'm going to get myself coffee in the morning, like those things. So when I was like thinking about this conversation, I was trying to think about it in a more holistic sense, because to avoid burnout, you can't just do those things. You got to do more internally. So as we've been growing and we're growing, when we first started, Stefanie, you know this, I had an extremely hard time, even though we had employees, asking them to do things. And as weird as that sounds, like, we have a 12,000 square foot warehouse. I felt extremely horrible asking somebody to take the trash out. Yeah. So I had to get over a lot of that. So for me, running in the warehouse, a big thing for me to avoid burnout, to help avoid burnout, is delegate where I can delegate. And there's a couple of things that go along with that. You got to let go of a decent amount of control. So this can end up being a catch-22. Like, there's too much on your plate. You're growing. You got to really look at like what your strengths are, what you enjoy to do, what you enjoy doing, and what you can hand off. And sometimes you got to put your tail between your legs and realize there's somebody else on our staff that can do X, Y, and Z better. And if that's the case, you should always be handing stuff off. And for me, it was extremely hard. It took me a couple years to be okay with doing this, just because I always feel like I don't want to give anybody trouble, even though there are employees. I don't want to make anybody do something like clean the bathrooms at the warehouse So anyways, I've gotten over that. So that's helped me a lot, is delegating where I can delegate and realizing that if I don't delegate in places where somebody can do something else better, I'm doing a disservice to our company. Helps avoid burnout, but it also helps our company. I don't know. In a sense. So that's a big one.
I think that can be said too about doing it in your home life too, as far as when, and it doesn't have to be all the time, but when you're really at max like stress level, or for us, like the fourth quarter is usually our craziest time, is speaking up and asking for help that way too, or just being open and communicative that, I've got a lot on my plate right now, and unfortunately it takes all of my time and energy, and I need help in these places, and having that, if you have a partner, but also not being afraid to accept help when others are asking. Like, I have a story of a friend of mine who, her mom wanted to mow her lawn, and she felt horrible saying yes to that, even though it's something that then her family member feels good by doing it and helping them out in a way to free up some time. So accepting help can be really, really hard. I do not like to accept help, hardly ever. So it's one of those things of just getting over your ego and taking that help.
In the same way, it's so hard to take help. Even if it, like, I'm going to be honest, I like from time to time for help to be offered. Like, I like how that feels. But even though that I like how it feels, it's still very hard to accept it. You know what I'm saying? I like to know that there's people who surround me who are supportive, but like, I just like how it feels. I don't like taking that. So like learning, getting rid of your ego and just learning how to like take help when you can get help.
They wouldn't ask if they didn't want to. So it's one of those. Yeah.
It's kind of a mind fuck thing for me. Like it's difficult. I run in circles with this all the time. So another one that's a little bit non-traditional when you think about avoiding burnout that has really helped me was we've talked about in earlier podcasts. I went through an EO program here in Charlotte, and
Mhm.
for me, talking to some of the members of EO helps me avoid burnout because all the people in EO, to be an EO, you have to have $1 million or more a year in revenue. So you're always going to be talking to businesses that you know are in the thick of it. Because if you're at $1 million or more, like it's a whole different thing than being $50,000 a year business. Everything's just different. So for me,
Mhm.
I've learned that that is what that community is there for. All these people in EO like want to support other local businesses and entrepreneurs and it's like a little family. So even though I'm not currently in EO because I graduated their EOA program, I still like today this morning I talked to a guy on the phone. I've never even met in person, but he's in the local circle and it really helped bring my stress down about a certain situation. So for me that works, connecting with businesses our size and bigger who the owners are willing to just talk completely openly about whatever's going on. So for me that's a big one.
Mhm. Absolutely.
What about Steph?
Um,
You want to, if you don't have
mhm.
anything to talk about that, you want to talk about maybe some ways we don't do very good. I'm gonna just put this out here, you guys. Stephanie and I both have gone through burnout this year, and not just because of work. Like we both have an extreme amount
Yeah.
of personal things going on. You can't avoid when
Mhm.
work is hard and personal. Like there's nothing we can do. You still got to be a mom and a wife and a
Yep.
homemaker and do all those things. You can't just put them away. So Stephanie and I
Mhm.
are not very good about when things are really hard dealing with it. So I don't know.
Yeah. No, we're not. We're not great at it. Like I, and our goal is to be better with it next year.
So we have a goal because we're horrible at it.
We have a goal because as of right now, I mean, we're fast approaching our 4 year
Mhm.
anniversary. The most we've ever taken as far as a vacation is a long
Mhm.
weekend, and even on those vacations, we are
Mhm.
still throughout, a couple times a day checking messages to make sure that if there's something super important, we haven't missed it. Even though I remind myself there's never really unless the warehouse like blows
Or
up,
the
there's
website
not
isn't
really.
working. Warehouse blows up or website
Yeah,
isn't working. We really shouldn't be doing what you're saying, but we do. We both do it.
everything
Hmm.
can wait. Even a week. I hate to say that, but even a week, like it hurts to say that out loud, but most things are not to the point where it can't wait a week to address you know, if it's necessary. So we're both trying and we're both going to attempt to take vacations. And it's not that we don't support each other
Right.
taking those. Like, whenever we've let each other know, hey, I want to do this with my
Right.
family, or hey,
Right.
I need a Friday and a Monday off or something, it's always like, absolutely
Right.
go do it. But ourselves
Hmm.
personally cannot let it go. Like, we still are
Oh
checking things constantly. We're always in the thick of it, even though we have employees at the warehouse that can hold down the fort
yeah.
for Maggie if she's going to be gone. Most of the stuff that I do, for the most part, if I plan well enough ahead, I can have things already to go beforehand as far as things that absolutely need to be done. But all of the other stuff can wait, or Maggie can pick up the slack on some of that stuff too. So
Yeah.
we just are really have a hard time letting things go. But we are finding too, and I'm speaking for Maggie as well as myself, but we're finding that if we don't take those breaks, if we don't do things um, after hours and before hours of work, the burnout happens a lot faster, and it can really knock you on your
Hmm.
butt. It, and the other thing is too, oh, I don't want to cry, but I'm dealing with families that are, or someone in my family that's having an extreme amount of stress, and it's manifesting physically now. So it's one of those like, if you don't do something
Mhm.
about it, something bad
Mhm.
potentially could happen. So it's better to be proactive and not let it get to a point where you're like, oh my God, I have to step in and do something, or I am going to break. So being proactive, and it can be such small things that you don't expect to actually make a difference. So I have been suggested, I don't know, a bajillion times now, and I'm going to start it, is to have some sort of meditation practice. Just in the morning, set your intentions, and also like even just breathing like through things, and to physically get away from the situation if you need a couple minutes to just, because for us the burnout is because of stress. I don't think we're having a ton of like creative burnout necessarily. Every once in a while it's like I don't have a great idea, but they come
Mhm.
back after a couple of days. It's the
Mhm.
stress burnouts that we're kind of dealing with more so. um so practice deep breathing and step away from your desk and go just take a 10-minute walk and not feel guilty
Right.
about
I think
doing
I
that.
think
Like,
for me, and I think it's the same for you, but I want everybody to hear this. Our stress is not just from work. This is neither of us
no, no.
s- work contributes to it. What we do. I know it might sound funny because we're selling artificial floral supplies, but it's really fucking
Yeah,
stressful. But it's not the our only source of stress. So, like, you're giving
no.
good examples at work, but like in family life, to like going back to previous podcasts, like setting boundaries, because family dynamics can be really
Hmm.
difficult, or like with your family in your home, like having them know the language you need to use, like if you just can't, if you're really about to break, having those conversations
Yeah.
ahead of time so people know what it looks like when you're about to lose it, what you're going to say to ask for help, because it looks different when you're in it.
Yeah. Ab-
Yeah, it's it's Stephanie and I's families both depend on this business, and so do all of our employees. And it's so beautiful that we've built what we built, and we can depend on it. But there's so much stress that for me that comes with it. And that's one stress you
mhm.
can't make go away. You got to write paychecks. you To us and our employees. We have employees here that their entire family's income comes from them working here. It's a
Yeah, it's
lot
a
of
lot of
pressure.
pressure.
But I don't know. We're really not good at this stuff, you guys. But we are setting the intention for next year of Stephanie and I have never had like,
Yeah.
oh, we can take this many days off. But it clicked in my head the other day
Hmm.
of like, what the F are we doing? Like, we're 4 years into this now, and there's no defined,
Hmm.
like, you get this many days off. And I think for me, like, I can't talk for you, but I think for me, if I'm like,
Hmm.
I have 3 weeks this year, I'm going to use those 3 weeks, because I feel like it's a perk of our job. Um,
Yeah. Well, and it's giving us permission. It wasn't that like we could have
yes,
done that
we
at
could
any
have.
point, but I think we just, I don't know, it came to a breaking point that we're
Right,
finally like, yeah, we should have
right.
something actually, and it makes it
Yeah,
more real when it's like in
yes,
writing
yeah.
kind of thing. Because we do, I mean, the joy of having your own business, or is supposed to be the joy, is the
But
flexibility
we're
that comes with
workaholics
it.
and we fucking suck.
But we're the opposite. So it's like, yes, we can take our kids to the doctor
Right.
and not worry about it. Yes, like we can schedule an appointment during the day that's hard to schedule in the evenings or the weekends, but we also don't want to
Right.
take advantage of that at the same time. That, because with us being, and this is different when you own it all on your own type thing, but we rely on each other. It's a 50-50, and we're very much about everything
Hmm.
being fair across the board. So by saying, okay, we each have this amount of time to take off, it's fair across the board. A good way to avoid burnout is to just kind of laugh through the pain to say, but it it feels better to laugh than to cry
Right.
most of the time about stuff. I don't. We could. I guess we could talk a little bit about like creative burnout on a more like what we've done in the past. I feel like now for me, because all of my creativity is wrapped in a job, like all I do is create. It has taken the joy out of it in some ways. And I'm sure a lot of makers can attest to this because you start doing something that you absolutely love. And it's not that I don't still love it. It's just sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I have to make X, Y, and Z again, or how many like how many times can I do the same project in a different way? And it starts to get a little frustrating. But I've also kind of warped my mindset a little bit in those and take it as an opportunity to push myself another way. I also, to help kind of keep the creative spark going, is I will try other types of crafts that have nothing to do with flowers. And I think this year in particular, like with
Mhm.
TikTok and things like that, we've done some other things that
Mhm.
are a ton of fun. Do I hate having to film things all the time? Sometimes, yeah. Like I just want to create, but I also feel like if I'm creating something, I should be filming it. I might as well. To two stones or whatever, or two one stone, two birds. I never get that
Stephanie, I
saying
think
right.
for me, like, it probably sounds very weird, but I'm going to explain it. Like, I full on have creative burnout. I'm not doing projects and filming stuff, but I'm mixing all the paints for our dye assortment. I'm trying to come up with new products. And I think if you guys have listened to other podcasts, before Stephanie and I owned Oh You're Lovely, we both have creative handmade businesses. So I don't know, 5, 6
Hmm.
years, I had a business where I was making things and selling it. So it's a long time. I went to the store and got some yarn so I could make my daughter a cowl for this winter, and I can barely do it. Like, I can barely stomach doing it. It's like I have zero.
Yep.
I've completely lost my ability to have a contentment with a project, which
Hmm.
that was my whole 20s, my entire 20s, and the first part of my 30s were spent being creative. So it's been a huge transition for
Yep.
me. If I can make myself do something, it feels good, but it's a whole lot of head
Hmm.
trash headed up to like trying to make something. And I don't know, like I went from this super creative person to like now I feel like I'm just a business person. I feel like that. It's a
Hmm.
little weird. And I don't know if my spark's ever
Yeah.
going to come back, but I mean, I feel the creative burnout for sure.
I know. I'm that way with painting. Like I painted for years, and then one day I looked at the canvas and I was just like, I don't
Mhm.
want to do this anymore. And I haven't picked up like to really paint. And every once in a while, like I'll see past photos, and I'm
Right.
like, oh man, that was pretty decent. And I wish I could enjoy that. It's not so much that I wish I could do that again because I could do it. It's just I don't know. It just doesn't bring the same satisfaction and joy that it used to be. It feels like a chore, and that's not what I want that to feel like. So for the most part, have come to terms with it and like released it and was like, it's fine. It is what it is. But every once in a while, it still kind of tugs at me. But I feel like with creative burnout, it's good to just it's
Mhm.
okay to experience it. It happens to everybody and not to feel like there's something wrong with you. Um, but try to switch things up a little bit. Maybe put something down and try a different medium or just stop creating for a little bit and find different ways to be creative that aren't necessarily what you would flat out think.
Yeah.
So like cooking can be
So
super
I
creative.
will do that
There's
sometimes.
all
I
these other
will maybe twice a month I have a spurt of like I'm gonna bake something and I'm gonna make pasta salad for tomorrow and I'm gonna make dinner for tonight and like I do all this stuff like in one swoop. So that does feel good. And you're right,
yeah.
that can be a creative outlet, for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those you can find something else to do to still get that
Right.
spark and that joy. And then everything else, it's not going anywhere. It'll come back when you're ready for it to come back. And sometimes that particular part of creativity or that medium that you were using may not be the thing that brings you that joy anymore. And that's okay. Now, if it's your job, I mean, that's a whole nother set of like can of worms that you have to kind of dig through. Because, like, if I didn't want to make anything with flowers again, like,
Right.
that's just not that's just not the thing. So it's looking for other places to get that
Mhm.
creative joy spark, than what is like you have deemed as your income driver. So I don't really look at what I do now as like a creative
It's
outlet.
your job,
It
right?
is my job, and it can create some like spark of creativity, especially that's why I like to play with different materials and try to push things. And I always get frustrated when they don't work, but at least
Right.
it's something to try out and kind of push around so you're not just doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I don't know if I don't really want to necessarily tell what other like floral industry type people to do as far as to find a joy in another spot, because it's like I can understand if you are somebody who makes like five different types of bouquets and that's all that you make, like you may want to offer custom work, but there's a whole nother thing with custom work. And those who do custom work may want to, there's a lot you can do that makes
Mhm.
sense for your own business. So I don't really want to necessarily, when I made floral pieces to sell, I was not in the bridal market at all, and I wasn't interested in it. So I had always declined any requests to make anything. But when it came to finished pieces, I pretty much always just made what I wanted to make, and I didn't do a lot of custom stuff. I've never really liked custom stuff. I just have more pressure to me for custom stuff, so I've never really done them. But I don't know, that was a slight tangent. I'm not sure where I'm going with that whole
I think the
conversation,
point is, you
but
guys, is like burnout happens, and there's can be so many degrees of burnout. We're actually pretty horrible at dealing with
Mhm.
it, but we intend to be better.
Yeah. I think too, if you don't deal with it,
Oh yeah.
it's
Oh
going to build
yeah.
up, and it gets really bad if you don't acknowledge it. The whole like just push through, everything's going to be fine is
You
you can
can't do
only
that
do
with
that so
little
much
things. You can't
until
do that with big life things. And I
yeah.
actually take offense to it. Like if I'm in a really, really, really low place and somebody close to me says something like that, I it's offensive. I feel like it's very
Mhm.
dismissive
Yeah.
to like give people that advice. Just push through
Yeah.
it. I mean, little stuff sometimes, yeah, just fucking shake it off. You spilled your coffee on yourself. Who the fuck cares? Like, get on with the day. But when you feel your world's falling apart, I feel like it's really inappropriate to tell somebody that, you know? Of course, it's going to get better. That doesn't mean you
Yeah.
shouldn't take actions in the moment to try to make it better.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. What would you say some of those actions would be that you would
Find
do?
somebody you're close with that is there to hear you and isn't going to judge you. Um,
Mhm.
I look internally very deeply. I'm not sure that's a good thing, but I always find myself looking inside and trying to pick apart why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. There's usually a nugget of wisdom there that's
Yeah.
hard to look at, but it will help like de-escalate how I'm feeling internally, you know?
And you can do that too, like with journaling and things like that too, if that's kind of your jam. It's never been mine. My hands always cramp. So hate physically writing stuff. But that's definitely too something to kind of open things up is to do some journaling as well about the feelings that you're having. And then you can kind of reflect back on them to understand maybe where the connections are
Yep,
for
it's
that.
hard.
Therapy,
Yep.
therapy is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with going to therapy and talking to somebody who's an independent who doesn't really there's no judgment in that kind of situation. So if you I don't know. It's hard I think right now like I've looked into it and it's harder to actually get in to see a therapist if you haven't already, but don't let that deter you either. It's definitely something that is a good tool to have as well.
Yeah, I
And
think that
yeah,
if you guys
I
have
think
other
that's
ways you've dealt with burnout, like feel free to share them with us in the comments wherever you're listening to this.
yeah, just know that it's normal. There's nothing wrong that you did to experience it, and you can get through it. It's just don't ignore it to a point where it becomes life altering in some ways. So
Nip it in the
definitely nip it. Yeah,
bud.
it's fine. So acknowledge and then
Yeah.
make some changes, even small ones. Stay hydrated. That can make a
Don't forget to
huge
eat meals.
difference.
That's something I
Believe it
do,
or not.
is when I start
Yes.
spiraling from burnout, I skip meals, and that I know it sounds dumb, but that makes everything so much worse. So much worse because your body is
Yep.
in whatever it goes to when it's going through something intense, like, in skipping
Mm-hmm.
eating is like the opposite. Your body needs nutrition and rest. And
Yeah.
but I mean, I've done it this week. I've been in a pretty deep hole recently, and a couple times this week I didn't bring lunch, and it's horrible. I should not be doing that in the
I
morning.
should be
Did you pack your
messaging you
lunch?
every day. That's the one joy I have, being close. But I'm the same way too, as far as, even though I'm legit like 2 steps away from a kitchen to have my lunch or whatever. And my one cheat is like, I have meals delivered to me, not to the rest of my family. Like I cook everything for the rest of the kids. My husband handles his own stuff because he likes certain things and I don't know how to cook them. But I have meals delivered so that I don't have to think about getting everything right. But I still will skip, especially lunch. I'll skip quite often, and I don't eat breakfast. So it's like the first time I'm actually eating is 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and then I'm wondering why,
Yes,
like, I have a
yes,
headache or I'm
yes.
lethargic or whatever. Yeah, like I didn't drink enough
Yeah,
water and I didn't eat
yeah,
today. That might be might be the issue.
yeah,
So fuel your body so that it can figure out what it needs to do to get to a more calm point. And because it's like
yeah,
all of this stuff is like shooting off in your body. It's all these stress hormones and things like that too. So treat yourself as best as you can in those kind of
yeah.
situations and give yourself a lot of grace.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I think that's a
that's
good
what we
wrap up.
got. We're not experts, just talking from our experiences
Yeah.
of doing this for 4 years.
And this time next year, we'll have
Yeah,
taken
if
some
if you
vacations.
hear a podcast a year from now and
'Cause
we're like, we haven't had any time off, please send somebody to kick us into gear.
call us
Yes.
call us out.
Yep.
All right. I think that's a good setup. If you have a suggestion for a podcast topic, we'd love to hear those. You can email us at podcast@ohyourlovely.com. You can leave a message or a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, because we do also stream this on YouTube. Give the podcast a like and a subscribe and all of those things. Share it if you find this to be knowledgeable or great to listen to, with your friends. And I think
And
that's
on to the
everything.
next one.
All right, you guys, we will see you on another podcast.
All
I'm
right, thanks,
Stephanie.
guys.
That's Maggie. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you guys super soon.